We are happy to invite you to our CHARM All Investigator meeting. And just as a quick reminder for those of you who are sort of new to our group, CHARM is a collaboration that includes Henry Ford Health System, Wayne State University, Michigan State University, University of Michigan, and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, as listed here on the slide. But we also have other collaborators, including two of whom are on the phone now, including Dr. Raina Ficharova from Harvard and Harvard's Brigham and Women's Hospital. Dr. Ficharova and her team are, we're happy to have them as partners affiliated with our ECHO Cohort Award. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. And also Dr. Carolyn Salafia, who many of you just saw, speaking from Placental Analytics, and Dr. Salafia and her team are also closely affiliated with our ECHO Award. So we're thrilled to have this collaboration in Michigan. And again, many of you know this, but for those of you who are sort of newly joining our collaboration, I wanted to just go over a little bit of why we have so many different names that we toss around. So we like to think of CHARM as sort of our umbrella organization. CHARM stands for our group who is really affiliated around the idea that child health advances from research with mothers. And CHARM at this time is primarily funded by ECHO, the NIH ECHO Program Award, which funds at this time two of our cohorts: ARCH, the Archive for Child Health Research, that was primarily located in Lansing, Michigan, the pregnancy cohort, and MARCH, which is our Michigan statewide probability sample of births in Michigan. We call that MARCH, the Michigan Archive for Research in Child Health. And I should point out that we also have other cohorts that we're affiliated with, including MMIP, that is the Santa's cohort. But I've listed here ARCH and MARCH because we're currently following those children with the ECHO-wide protocol. So those are the cohorts that are primarily funded by NIH right now. And I just also wanted to point out that we couldn't have started our MARCH cohort without substantial funding from the Michigan Health Endowment Fund. But we've also had lots of other sources of funding along the way, including internal funds from all of our organizations. And we hope to continue that additional funding. So lots of you are applying for other NIH funds, sort of affiliated with these cohorts, and also Vasanta's cohort. We just, I just want to give you that sort of sense of the umbrella organization, but we're hoping to continue growing these collaborations. So today, we have our CHARM All Investigator meeting, and we try to have this meeting at least a couple of times a year. We used to have it in person and rotate around the state, but now we're trying to continue virtually as long as necessary, and maybe we'll continue with some combination of virtual and in-person in the future. But our goals always are really to engage and collaborate both within our CHARM organization and also across ECHO. And we really want to just spark some ideas for you today. So that's what the agenda has been built around. So today I'm going to give you some information about ECHO's current data analysis priorities. And Dr. Ficharova is going to talk about some future priorities. And then we're going to have two examples of engaging with ECHO-wide priorities. So those will be presented to us by Dr. Jennifer Strong from Henry Ford Health System and Dr. Gail Shipp from MSU. And then we're going to have a little bit of information that Alexa Kruger is going to present from our study office about our local progress. Then Dr. Panitz is going to present some quick look at our MARCH data. And then Tracy Thompson's going to go over our process for how you can request data or biological specimens. And then we will have a meeting wrap up by Dr. Panitz, our fearless leader. So we have a great program today. Just some housekeeping details. We do ask people to keep yourself on mute if you're not talking. And maybe keep your video off. If that's up to you. Some people say it helps with everybody's connections. I really don't know. I'm not an IT person. But if you have questions along the way, we're a pretty casual group, so just go ahead and unmute yourself and speak up. Tracy Thompson will be moderating, and we will have questions after each speaker. And we'll have some time at the end as well. But if you want to jump in during a presentation, I'm sure no one would mind. Also, if you want to use the chat, if that's your preference, go ahead and do that. And Tracy will be monitoring the chat as best she can. So we'll try to keep up however it works for you. So I'm just going to spend a little time talking to you about the ECHO data analysis priorities. And these were presented at the May 7th ECHO Publications Committee meeting. So I am one of maybe 7 associate chairs on the ECHO Publications Committee, but we also have several other members of our CHARM group on that committee. That includes Dr. Charlie Barone, Dr. Sarah Comstock, Dr. Kim McKee, and perhaps others from our group that are on the ECHO Publications Committee. So the DAC, the ECHO DAC, that's the data analysis, it presented some work to us, some of these priorities to us at the May 7th meeting. And so the crux of it is that last fall, every ECHO award, and there are 35 of those, and some contain multiple cohorts, some are the Coordinating Center Award. There are 35 ECHO awards, and there was a requirement by the program office that each award submit at least 2 analysis proposals for future work. And so they had this ambitious target of 70 new papers that would be submitted to professional journals by July 1st. And then they actually received way more, and about 113, I think, proposals were approved to move forward. And then everybody realized that this was a very ambitious goal. And so the Data Analysis Center in particular recognized this sort of need for focused productivity. They're getting lots of data queries. There's a lot of need for data harmonization across ECHO awards, a lot of requests for data analyses by all components. So this includes the cohorts like ours, Arch and March, the Data Analysis Center, the DAC, the ProCore, that's the Patient Reported Outcomes Core, and the Coordinating Center. So all of those have a lot of demands. All of those different components have a lot of demands on the Data Analysis Center. So this next bit of priorities I'm going to show you is sort of the DAC and the ECHO Program Office's solution for how to prioritize. So they identified 13 high priority papers, plus some other investigator identified high priority COVID manuscripts as a result of the NOSIs, the Notice of Special Interests around COVID. And so the DAC is focusing on these 13 priorities first. Part of the reason I really wanted to mention this to you is because this was presented to us, those of us that attended the Publications Committee meeting in May. But I don't think that the communication ever went out widely to the rest of the ECHO investigators. And so many of you are participating in ECHO-wide analysis proposals, and you might wonder why things are slowing. And maybe it is, or maybe you wonder why things are speeding up. So if you're part of one of these 13 high priority papers, then they're really speeding up the work on those. And if you're part of other papers, then I'm going to show you a little bit of where those priorities have fallen. So those initial proposals that they're really hoping to get papers out for the summer include anything related to opioid or opioid use or COVID-19. And you can imagine these are sort of dual pandemics in the US right now. So high public health priority. Anything that was already identified by the program office as what they call a big win. The program office, the Publications Committee, a lot of people weigh in on those, and then ultimately the steering committee votes on those. And then anything that's almost done or the data is available and it's easy. So that's how they prioritize. So, kind of common sense, practical, logical priorities for moving forward. And so I'm putting this slide up, not expecting that you'll be able to, quickly read all of these, but just letting you know these will be available in the slides the slide compilation we'll send out of this meeting after the meeting. So these are the ones that are prioritized for July 1st submission. So if you're on any of those, you're working hard on those already. And then I'm going to go very quickly through 4 more slides just to let you know that this is the next phase of prioritization. So after those 13 high priority proposals, the DAC is going to focus on anything else related to the COVID notice of special interest analysis proposals, and their deadline for finishing those analyses is October 1st. Then they're quickly by the end of October, there's another 13 that are prioritized, and then they have another set prioritized for December. That's 17 of them. So those are all of those. So I'll just, if you have any questions about those, just let me know specifically where they fall. I can look it up for you. But also just to keep in mind, we can continue to submit new analysis proposals, and as one is completed, other ones fall into the queue for priority, but there's sort of a pecking order there. And now I am going to turn it over to Dr. Ficharova, who is going to talk about some future priorities.
Hi, everybody. I am delighted. I can't say enough how grateful I am for this opportunity to present to you today and to show actually how much we want you. The next.
There's some background noise. I'm sorry to interrupt. There's some background noise that's interrupting Dr. Ficharova. Please mute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tracy, may I have the next slide, please? So to cut to the chase, I just want to invite you today to think about how much we want you and how much we need you to lead these new concepts, new big impact transformative concepts that have been aligned with current gaps according to our major stakeholders, and that we hope will also integrate newly accumulated ECHO-wide resources. Within ECHO, we have this new group which is tasked with surveying gaps according to major stakeholders and what they have identified for us based on priorities and gaps identified by the United States Preventive Services Task Force, the American Pediatric Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, is summarized here in this slide. We hope that it will spark new ideas, because these are our priorities for the next 6 months within the ECHO pre, peri, and postnatal life stage perimeter. So one priority, one big gap is related to our limited knowledge of lead exposure, methods that are used for surveying and interpreting levels of lead exposure, evaluation of intervention for reducing these blood levels of lead exposure during and particularly their impact on maternal health and PPP outcomes. And now we have from the ECHO resources side, we have accumulating larger and larger set of geospatial data that will allow particularly addressing this gap related to how specific geographic locations among risk populations may affect levels of lead exposure and their impact. Another identified priority by the Preventative Task Force, Services Task Force, is the fact that we know very little about weight gain interventions, their effectiveness, and especially in older mothers, 34 and older. Another unknown is how e-cigarettes impact PPP outcomes and what interventions may be available there. And most importantly, we want to focus on a new aspects and new way of researching health disparities in view of structural racism, increasing granularity when we collect ethnicity data, looking at self-identification versus perceived race, treating immigrant health differences, just as we treat differences in insurance coverage. Integration of disparity with genomic data. And now we have data that have accumulated from the genomic analysis within ECHO. So ECHO-wide concepts will be possible looking at this integration of health disparities with genomic data. And of course, we continue to have COVID-19 exposures and outcomes as a priority. And we think that now with our cohorts and our followed children getting older, we will have more ability to study transgenerational PPP outcomes. So this is all I wanted to share with you today briefly. And now I think.
All right, thank you. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my OIF project. And it's really focusing on optimizing placental collection for metabolomics using a methanol-based method that's done at room temperature instead of having to flash freeze specimens. So I think everyone here knows, that the placenta is critical for normal fetal development. I did want to mention quickly, though, that the placenta might also influence long-term health outcomes for offspring. Various placental features have been linked to an increased risk of allergy and asthma, and they might also be linked to neurodevelopmental outcomes, such as autism and ADHD. So there's really this need to better understand placental function and how it might influence some of these long-term outcomes. And I think a bit we can get at that. I'm sorry, having a little technical difficulty here. There we go. I think we can get that a little bit by looking at the placental metabolome. I think the placental metabolome can tell us a lot about how the placenta responds to stressors, particularly those in utero, and how it might influence child health outcomes, like those I mentioned earlier. There are a number of barriers or challenges to collecting placental samples for metabolomics, particularly at non-research institutions. Community hospitals, even ours, such as Henry Ford, we don't always have liquid nitrogen and some of those things at the ready on our L&D floors. And there's a need to try and overcome some of that. And so this project really proposes, kind of as I mentioned earlier, collecting samples in 80% methanol at room temperature as an alternative to flash freezing. I think the fact that it's done at room temperature is a big advantage. It's also very cost effective. This method has been successfully applied in cancer research, but has not been optimized or used widely with placental tissue. So in this project, we really wanted to optimize this methanol-based metabolite collection protocol for use with placental samples. At this point, we weren't sure even if the duration of fixation of methanol influenced the results. So that's kind of one of the things we wanted to look at. We wanted to really just develop the protocol, compare the metabolites obtained from methanol fixation or extraction to those from the gold standard, which is the flash frozen placental samples. And kind of one of our underlying questions is really like, what is the optimal amount of time that tissue should be fixed in methanol at room temperature if we're trying to match the gold standard? So this slide really just presents sort of a schematic for what our protocol. We sampled actually the maternal side of the placenta. One sample would be put in liquid nitrogen and flash frozen, and then we were able to do metabolomics later on that. Additional samples were put in 80% methanol, and we know that some of the metabolites would stay in the tissue itself. That's represented by the little pink rectangle. Very artistic, I know. And then some of the metabolites would leach out into the methanol. And then we can remove the tissue from the methanol and do the metabolomics assay on the tissue itself, as well as on the metabolites. Like the methanol extract is kind of what I call it throughout the rest of the talk. And then this also has the advantage, which I'm not talking much about this today, but this also has the advantage that we can do histology on the methanol fixed tissue as well. So we can kind of link up what the placental structure, what's going on histologically with what we're getting out of it in terms of the metabolites. And then for a little bit more about what I'm talking about today, we varied this duration of methanol fixation. So the amount of time that the tissue sat in methanol at room temperature, we varied anywhere from 1 hour to 48 hours. And we had multiple replicates of that. And then obviously we compared that to the gold standard. So as expected, we were able to get a number of metabolites out of our tissue samples using this method, on average about 2,500 metabolites from the various samples. I'm going to kind of tell you this key result here, and then I'll show you the data that supports it. So there really weren't any statistically significant time effects. So the amount of time that the tissue sat in methanol at room temperature didn't have a big effect on the number of metabolites that we got out. So this slide on the y-axis is the number of metabolites detected. Across the x is the amount of time that the tissue sat in methanol. So it would sit in methanol, and then we take the tissue out and we did metabolomics on the tissue itself and then on the methanol extract. And the methanol extract here is shown in like that orange red color, and the tissue is represented in blue. And then also over here on the far right, we have the flash frozen specimen for comparison. So the tissue samples on average had about 42 fewer metabolites, just a very small change detected when we compared them to the methanol extract samples. But this was not statistically significant, so suggesting that the amount of time that the tissue sat in the methanol did not have a big effect. Again, for every 12 hours of additional methanol fixation time, about 11 fewer metabolites were detected, but again, it was not statistically significant. So when we compared our results to the gold standard, both the methanol extract and the tissue samples fixed in methanol for about 6 hours had significantly higher number of metabolites detected. This was also true for the 12-hour fixation and the 24-hour fixation. So it didn't seem to matter how long the tissue sat in methanol. We always pretty much ended up with a higher number of metabolites compared to the flash frozen gold standard. And so we looked at the interclass correlation coefficients for each sample type compared to the gold standard. Overall, the methanol extracts had pretty poor agreement with the flash frozen, and I'll show you that here. So on the right side, we have all of the methanol extracts and for at each time point. On the left side are the tissue extracts for each time point. And actually the highest agreement was between the tissue that was fixed in methanol for 1 hour compared to the gold standard. So this one on the far left was most similar to the gold standard flash frozen. So overall, our results suggest that placental samples collected in 80% methanol at room temperature can yield similar metabolic data to the flash frozen specimens. Specifically, that 1 hour of fixation and looking at the tissue itself was most ideal, but the total fixation time was not as important. We do need to do some additional work to characterize the differences between the metabolites in the methanol extract as well as in the tissue. And as I mentioned earlier, we are currently working to see how some of this relates to placental histology. So really being able to look at that very same sample, the histology of the tissue with the metabolites that we get out of it. And then also moving forward, we're working on how these metabolites relate to maternal health, and specifically we're looking at maternal obesity and in obese and non-obese women and the different metabolites that we're getting out using these methods. And I just want to acknowledge the many people who helped contribute to this work. All the metabolomics assays were done at the University of Michigan, the Michigan Regional Comprehensive Metabolomics Resource Corps Laboratory, and all the collaborators on this. I just thank you. A lot of work to get all these placental samples. So are there any questions? And I also put my email up there if anybody has a question they come up with later, please feel free to email me.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gail Shipp. I am an Ecodiversity Supplement recipient, and I am completing my training as well as this research study through Michigan State University as a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics. So today I'm going to present a little bit about the research project, which is titled Understanding Breastfeeding Practices Among ECHO Cohort Participants Before and During/After the COVID-19 Pandemic. Okay, here we go. All right. So I'll just, again, my project is still slightly in the early phases, but the purpose of this presentation really today is to share a little bit about being an ecodiversity supplement with you all, as well as to share the research study where I am in terms of the progress that I've made thus far, and again, some of the processes that I followed being a diversity supplement recipient. So being an ecodiversity supplement recipient, I just want to share my primary mentor who sponsored me for this was Dr. Jean Kerber, who's also the PI of this project. And then my co-mentors are Nigel Paneth, as well as Sarah Comstock and Dawn Misra. Again, I'm receiving training in epidemiology and biostatistics. My doctoral degree was in human nutrition. And so just being able to receive that additional training as well as co-mentorship is definitely invaluable during this time. Being a diversity supplement recipient, I believe this is the inaugural cohort, so they're still figuring things out, but in my eyes, they're what I feel that we have received or will receive being a part of this group. Definitely it'll assist with facilitating communication, help with building networks. ECHO is a big network in itself. It'll allow us to learn about different disciplines because some of the other recipients are from different disciplines and have different expertise. And then we can build upon the strengths of each other. So we do have monthly meetings and hopefully have some accountability partners within that group as well too. So just to talk a little bit about the supplement in itself, and really the purpose of talking about this is because some of you all as primary investigators, you all can sponsor, if you come across students that may be eligible, you can definitely help to sponsor them. The whole purpose of this research supplement is to promote diversity, particularly in research. The application, we just passed the application due date. It was for May 26th, but I did include the notice, the number, so you, and as well as the link, so you have access to that. And again, it is to promote diversity. So if you come across a student who's in and it's also for doctoral students as well as postdocs. So if you come across someone who may be eligible, maybe consider sponsoring them during the next cycle, and you can apply through the parent grant. And so just to speak a little bit about my project that was funded through this supplement, the objectives of the project was twofold. One was to discover if exclusive breastfeeding protects against risk for childhood obesity among those exposed to maternal obesity in utero. And then the second component was to look at qualitatively and quantitatively the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women's breastfeeding practices as well as their experiences. And so I'm also going to share a little bit about the publication process. So although I am a recipient, I still had to follow the same process, and which is submit an analysis concept. And I'm going to share where I am in my progress as well as process as well too. But typically the steps go where you submit an analysis concept, which is on the publications program subsite on SharePoint for about 2 weeks. Following that, you'd be assigned a DAC representative, and then following that, you would submit a proposal. The DAC representative would analyze the data as the writing team would go ahead and draft the research product, which then would be submitted for review, and then go through step 6 of revise and resubmit to hopefully have a finalized research product to submit for publication. And so I'm just going to share a little bit about my few aims. So with the first aim, I was hoping to look at, where the research question was to look at exclusive breastfeeding and whether it's protective against childhood obesity among women with pre-pregnancy obesity. And really some of the importance or reasoning of why looking at that is that, as you all know, there is some existing scientific evidence that supports the benefits of breastfeeding, and it shows strong evidence for several benefits of breastfeeding on child and health development, but it still offers mixed as well as weak support for the relationship between breastfeeding and childhood obesity. And so since there are very few studies that have large enough sample sizes to assess this relationship, we thought completing an echo-wide analysis would result in an important scientific contribution. And so with that, we're following 3 aims, 2 procedural aims, which the first would be to describe the association between pre-pregnancy BMI and infant feeding practices. The second procedural aim would be to determine if childhood BMI differs among ECHO participants by pre-pregnancy BMI, and which would lead to our final primary aim, which would be to determine whether the duration of exclusive breastfeeding is associated with childhood overweight obesity, and whether its association differs among women who are either obese or overweight prior to pregnancy compared to normal weight women. And so just again to share a little bit about the progress and the process that I went through again, my project timeline, so my supplement is for 2 years. So my project timeline is to complete this before my supplement ends. Where I am currently, I have a DAC representative that has been assigned to me. I did complete and submit the analysis proposal. And so currently the data is being harmonized, which Dr. Kerver shared with you earlier. A lot of the data, the harmonization process, which is going on. And hopefully, I think based off that timeline, I should be able to hopefully have this have this manuscript submitted for publication by, I think, October. And so some of the variables of interest, obviously the maternal characteristics, we're going to look at maternal pre-pregnancy weight as well as height, the child weight and height. And then we're going to look at breastfeeding exclusivity, which we're still determining if, we're still determining how we're going to assess that variable depending on how it's asked in the questionnaire and how it ends up being harmonized. But with the second concept, and again, that one is echo-wide, so I am working again with other cohorts on this. The second concept is echo-wide as well too, and this one is looking at the era of COVID-19 pandemic and whether it'll affect breastfeeding initiation as well as duration rates. And so we have 2 aims with that. And really, why is this important? I mean, as you all know, we're living through a pandemic right now. And really, Although many women intend to breastfeed, there's limited documented evidence available, which it's still evolving regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, which may keep women from being able to reach their breastfeeding goals. And so we plan to determine if breastfeeding initiation rates among ECHO cohort participants differ prior to as well as during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we also want to do the same, looking at breastfeeding duration rates. And we're thinking about, I've been speaking with the DAC representative, we're thinking about maybe looking at it. That's why we kind of framed it or phrased it as the era, because it's still not over. And so we're definitely looking at that early shutdown date, and we're thinking about also including maybe another date or two in there, depending on how, just depends on how the data will look. But we're thinking about including a couple of dates in there to see if there's any differences among breastfeeding rates. And so again, it has the same timeline. Currently, I have a DAC representative that has been assigned to me. I am ready to submit the analysis proposal, but because the data is still being harmonized, because it has some similar variables as shared in my AIM-1. And so again, the final project deliverable will be a manuscript to submit for a journal publication. And then the last question that was really cohort specific that was included in my supplement, I really wanted to look at the decision-making experiences regarding infant feeding practices of ECHO participants who were pregnant or still breastfeeding during the early phases of the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, once again, this pandemic has really displayed some unique challenges to mothers in terms of making decisions about initiation, as well as continuing breastfeeding, and it may further impact certain subgroups. And so I wanted to just qualitatively get a better understanding of women's experiences during that pandemic and how it may influence breastfeeding. And so currently I'm in data collection regarding this. The original project deliverable obviously would be a manuscript for a journal publication, but interestingly, during, and which was nice, during one of the interviews, one of the participants did ask whether they would receive the results or in some form. So I plan to disseminate a one-pager on the CHARM website regarding the results that come from this particular research study. So we are asking some preliminary screening questions, and those are collected during the 9-month in the 9-month questionnaire, and based off of those preliminary screening questions, then from that point, I go ahead. I'm reaching out to the participants to conduct this in my structured interview over phone. And so really the takeaway was, because I wanted to think about a little bit, what could you all take away just from this? Because again, my project is still in the early phases, but I think some of the things that you all can take away, one, if you are in a position as a primary investigator, definitely I would suggest you look for candidates in the future that that may be eligible, that you would consider sponsoring. Another takeaway from this is that it's another way for you all to engage in ECHO-wide research. So if there are research questions that you're looking at specifically in the cohort, I believe if you combine with another cohort based off of my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that qualifies as ECHO-wide from that point. And so it's just to encourage you to do that. And also based off of what I presented thus far, you are still welcome to join my writing team. So I did leave my contact information. It's still in the early phases. So if it piques any of you, if it piques your interest, please reach out to me. And that is it. If you have, also acknowledgements. I want to thank Dr. Jean Kerber, who again is the PI of this research project, as well as my primary mentor. And also thank my co-mentors, Drs. Nigel Paneth, Sarah Comstock, as well as Dawn Misra, for supporting me as well as encouraging me throughout this process. Definitely want to thank the National Institute of Health for pushing this initiative to increase diversity in research, and definitely Charm Study Office for assisting and being welcoming throughout this process as well too.
So good afternoon, I'm Alexa Kruger and I'm the project manager for the Charm project, and I will be giving a little bit of an update on where we currently are with data collection and recruitment today. Okay, so Dr. Kerber went over this a little bit, but I wanted to refresh everyone on what our goals were for our different cohorts. First, the March cohort is a population-based sample of Michigan, and we hope to recruit 1,000 pregnant participants from 10 sampled hospitals, and additionally recruit 100 pregnant participants from Hurley Hospital in Flint, Michigan. So to the right there, the map of Michigan, you can see where all of our different hospitals are, yellow being Flint, Michigan. We also wanted to complete 3 prenatal surveys on each participant and then collect 3 urines, 2 bloods, and a placenta on each participant. Okay, so some recruitment progress. And we started recruitment in October of 2017 at Hurley Hospital. Continued to recruit until March 2020 when recruitment was suspended due to the COVID-19 outbreak. And we were able to partially resume in early fall of 2020, and then finally were able to fully get our recruiters back in the clinic this winter and late spring or early spring. So as of 5/21, this past May, all hospitals have been recruited from. And this is just a really big accomplishment that took a lot of different people working between engaging the clinic, working on administrative IRBs and other items, as well as the logistics in the clinic. So we're very excited to have reached this milestone. Okay, so this chart, you'll see all 11 hospitals that we currently or have recruited from in the past. The circle that is completely shaded means that we've completed that recruitment, or all of the babies have been born at that hospital. Currently, that's 4 hospitals. We're very close at 2 of the other hospitals to being completely finished, and are actively recruiting in all of the other ones shown. One thing, obviously, with COVID that we've noticed is that as COVID rates increase in the state of Michigan, our recruitment numbers do seem to slow down. And we believe probably a variety of reasons for that, but also just not wanting to add an extra person like the recruiter into your day, or phone visits have become a norm for prenatal visits. And so that's hurt us as well, as we need to recruit people in person. So this, again, will be available after the presentation or today's meeting. So if you want to look back at this, but okay. So this is a snapshot with numbers of our March prenatal recruitment and data collection. As of today or yesterday, we have recruited 757 pregnant mothers who are active. And what that means is that we've actually recruited 916 pregnant participants, but due to withdrawals, miscarriages, and out of sample, meaning that they delivered at a different hospital than the one that we sampled in our population-based hospital group, we only have 757. The babies that have been born at this point are 701, and the difference means that there are still some pregnant women in our sample. Below is a snapshot of our protocol in March. We do 3 prenatal surveys, 3 urine collections, 2 blood, a placenta collection, hair, and toenails. And so you can see we've collected over 1,000 prenatal surveys on our participants. We have collected over 1,500 urines, over 1,000 bloods. Those are all stored at Wayne State, with Sue Land overseeing the biobank. sent placentas to placenta analytics, and then recently just started hair and toenail collection to comply with the EchoEgg protocol. So that's a little snapshot of that. Okay. So currently our oldest child is 3.5 years old. And I say that because as you'll see, our percentage in the 3-year is a little low, but that's just because our sample is quite small still. We conduct 4 current postnatal follow-up visits, 3 and 9 months, and then 2 and 3 year. We stay steadily above 70% of our sample completing those surveys. And next year, we'll begin our in-home assessments for the 4-year-olds, starting in Flint, Michigan and Detroit, where we'll collect in-person assessment materials, NIH toolbox, biospecimens, etc. To the right are some data element examples. Dr. Panis will dive into this a little bit more, and so I just wanted to give some examples of what you could expect to find in our surveys. Most of these are echo-wide protocol elements, and we've had to divvy them up. And so anyways, this is a little snapshot of that. We also collect some postnatal biospecimens, particularly two main ones. The 3-month stool sample, which we have 309 samples for. Dr. Sarah Comstock collects those on our behalf. We also attempt a 3-month toenail collection, though we are moving this to the 9-month because of the lack of samples being sent back. We think that it might be hard to clip a 3-month-old toenail. So we're going to increase that age. And then we're going to begin early childhood hair on our March cohort. Okay, so we talk about March a lot, but ARCH is also one of our echo cohorts, and it, as Dr. Kerber said, it's a convenient sample of pregnancies started in 2008 in Sparrow OBGYN clinics in Lansing, expanded in 2016 to Traverse City and Detroit areas. And then starting in 2017, ARCH participants were asked to reconsent to the ECHO protocol. And we have 527 ARCH participants that are currently participating in ECHO. Okay, this is a little bit of a wordy slide, but the ARCH participants are a very compliant population. We started online surveys via RedCap Central, which is the main platform for ECHO, about 1.5 years ago. 89% on average complete their annual survey, and so there is a lot of data on our older group. Prior to COVID pausing in-person research at MSU, in-person assessments, or what we call IPAs, were completed at the MSU CHARM office. And so we were able to complete 39 of those. Again, those include like the NIH toolbox, anthropometrics, child surveys. But once COVID hit, we had to change gears. And so we created what is called a VIB, or a visit in a box, to collect as much of the IPA remotely as possible, primarily biospecimens and paper surveys. So we've had 23 returned to MSU. We're going to continue using this protocol to obtain these samples and other items, even though MSU has just opened up in-person research. And so we're working on restarting our IPAs within our COVID guidelines here. So we're hoping to bring on everyone who's completed a visit in a box to complete NIH toolbox and anthropometrics and things that can't be done as easily remotely. And then just one other note that I thought was important is to say we've received 296 teeth, and those have been collected from 160 ARCH participants. And so that's one of our easier biospecimens to collect. Okay. So lastly, I just wanted to say that none of this could be possible without our really great data collection team, both the recruitment team out in the field and also the follow-up and data management team here at MSU, or now at home. And I'm grateful to work with such a hard working and creative group. And they've handled COVID just really well and kept our participants engaged. And we've collected a lot of data considering there's a pandemic going on. So every number you saw, every variable you asked for has been collected by this team and many more before them. And so I just wanted to say thanks.
A couple of things in advance of this presentation. The first you may have already inferred, which is that our current contact principal investigator of the study is Jean Kerber. Some of you know, most of you know this, but I actually retired officially in May at the end of the semester, and now emeritus, and I remain as a part-time annual renewable faculty member paid on grants, which means I'm in relation to our study, I'm pretty much in the same position, except that we worked out, and we had planned this some years ago in case of my retirement, and it's been approved by NIH that Jean will become the contact principal investigator among the 6 co-principal investigators in our team. The second thing I want to say before the data I'm going to take you through a little bit of is just a glimpse, and it doesn't include anything about our biospecimen repository or about medical records that we may abstract, including the birth certificate, which is a medical record which contains about 100 perinatal variables, which we basically have already abstracted. And I also want to say that I'm going to show you some data, and some of the data is already being worked on by participants in the CHARM initiative. For example, as you see, I'm going to show you some breastfeeding data, and you've heard already that Gail Shipp is going to be quite involved in breastfeeding work. But as you may also have noticed, Gail was very open to including others in her initiatives. As you see, perhaps there are wrinkles to the data that you might say, oh, I'd like to add that and work with Gail and others to perhaps add another little wrinkle to where we might be going with this. And just to follow up with Gil, we do have we have clinical data other than the medical record from the birth certificate, and also from some of the information we collect from parents. We ask, for example, standard asthma questions in ARCH when the kids are old enough. There's a very standard formula for asking questions about the history of asthma, which is recognized by the American Thoracic Society, and we use those. And so we have scattered around lots of clinical information about the child. And we will get more when we do further work. So I think we went through all the acronyms. Maybe this is the third time, but just to remind you that CHARM is who we are, the collective of investigators working with our data, with the very nice idea, child health advances from research in mothers. Jean, among other things, is our developer of acronyms. She's very good at that. So she gave us that. March is the Michigan Archive for Research in Child Health, a statewide cohort.
That's good.
Arch is, thank you. She'll tell you about mama bears one day, and then you'll like that one. That's a particularly good one, Robert. Arch is the Archive for Research in Child Health, the earlier cohort recruited largely from Lansing. So I want to provide you just some glimpses into the data we're collecting and give you some sense of the size of it. You've heard some of this from Alexa. And hopefully the main focus is to stimulate some thoughts among you about research topics that you could do in our cohorts or in similar ECHO cohorts who have similar data. And more as the ECHO protocol becomes standardized, we get uniform data across the cohorts. And I'll focus on some of the extremes of the data, so you know that we do have people who have some of those extreme values that are so central, obviously, to doing analyses, particularly where the exposure risk is high. And I've not dealt with any variable that has a lot of missing data also. And some of the variables I'll talk about are not always readily available in perinatal research and child development research. So our sources are, as has been gone over a bit by Alexa, our pregnancy survey. This is actually, I'm sorry, this slide I realize now is misspecified. Well, it's not misspecified in terms of trimesters, but it might mislead you because Alexa referred to 3 interviews. The third interview has only just begun. It was added because of the need to complete some data that ECHO needed that we didn't get in our first 2 interviews. But basically, the first interview is very much related to the first, just slightly after the recruitment visit. And we have 722 of these. Last we analyzed the data. And the second survey is done probably in the 3rd trimester. We have 522 of these. Infant, we were required by ECHO to get a ton of information in the first year of life. Had to be done in the first year. It was so much that we decided to split up our surveying into 2 surveys, one at 3 months, one at 9 months, and we have something like 500 of each. And then for the 2-year survey, we don't have enough 3 years to look at. We have 263 items. So let me just show you a few things from the first prenatal survey. The poverty line is somewhere close to $25,000 a year for women for people, for families, that have 3 or 4 members in them. We have quite a few people who are below the poverty line, relatively low levels of education, do not own their own home. So we are able, and of course we have many more socioeconomic circumstance variables, but we have people whose circumstances are less than optimum that we can ask questions about the health effects of that. Just a couple of things. Vigorous activity. We have not a very detailed physical activity survey in the first trimester, but about 1 in 4 says they do vigorous physical activity, running, aerobics, heavy yard work. I didn't have access at this moment to the couch potato question. I do nothing at all, but it's not trivial, but I don't have it at my fingertips. Sleep is an area that is becoming of increasing interest. That 1/3 of our life we know so little about. And of the women are asked about their sleep quality on a Likert scale, and 15% of women in the first trimester say the quality of their sleep is much worse than before pregnancy. Interestingly enough, in the second prenatal survey, we got rather more information about sleep. It was twice as common to feel that sleep was worse in the 3rd trimester, about the 3rd trimester. And as I have a daughter who's currently in the 3rd trimester, I can affirm that sleep is an issue in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. Interestingly enough, something like 6% of our mothers say they use sedatives or sleeping pills in pregnancy. And as for sleep position, interestingly enough, left is nearly twice as common as right. Back sleeping and stomach sleeping are rare. I wonder how anybody in the 3rd trimester could be sleeping on her stomach, but that's what people report. Breastfeeding plans. We did ask women in advance what they thought when would they first feed a baby of any food formula that's not breast milk. And 1 in 6 or so said that they would be basically not breastfeeding for more than 1 month, which is interesting. Some might have thought it to be higher than that. As I'll show you in a moment, some women thought, and also some women, a small minority of women thought they might be still breastfeeding, exclusively breastfeeding at 9 months, interestingly enough. So those are the extremes. There are some remarkable extremes of breastfeeding behavior available for analysis. When we actually asked women in the 3-month survey, were they breastfeeding at that moment, 14% had never breastfed, which is quite similar to the estimate the mothers gave in the 3rd trimester. Not always the same mothers, obviously, but overlapping. 31% had stopped by 3 months, but 54% were still breastfeeding. This is not necessarily exclusive breastfeeding. And then, interesting enough, we asked the volume of formula taken in, which sometimes raises concerns among those who had been using some formula, that includes some breastfeeding mothers. 40% fed less than 4 ounces on average at each feed. Interesting enough, 15.8% took more than 7 ounces, which is a pretty heroic amount for little babies at 3 months. So we might want to look at some of those babies for how they their food consumption at later ages. 16% were already using some form of supplementary food at 3 months. Sleeping at night is a huge concern for the mothers of small infants. And so we asked how many, I took the extremes of looking at it, something like 1 in 5 of the babies were not sleeping as long as 4 hours at a stretch. This is the longest they've ever slept. That gives you some sense of some of the stresses that parents are involved have in the first year of life. But interestingly enough, nearly half were actually doing basically a close to a full night's sleep, which is always I would argue that the life experience of those mothers whose babies sleep less than 4 hours and those who sleep more than 7 hours.
Nigel?
Yeah?
Nigel?
Yes.
Nigel?
Yes. Yes. Can you not hear me?
Nigel? I'm sorry to interrupt. You're starting to break up. You're starting to break up, so I don't know if it's my internet. I wanted you to take off your camera to save your, so you won't get lost. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. Hold on just a second.
Oh, Sarah says it sounds fine. So maybe it's me. I'm sorry.
Well, never mind. You need to look at the slides anyway, not me. So I would just go to comment that the life experience is quite different of parents of kids who sleep a little bit and who sleep a lot. Okay, interesting. The question that I was quite interested in is whether mothers were adopting the back to sleep advice. And in our cohort, it is really 96% of mothers answered they sleep on their back or side. Only 4% put babies to sleep on the side. This is much, much better than national surveys have shown, which is more like 20%. And interestingly enough, in the first, this is the 9-month, right? This, I'm sorry, I can't quite see this. The 9-month survey, I'm sorry, this is the 3-month survey. We'd already had 8.4% of babies hospitalized since discharge from the hospital, 1 in 12. May surprise people, but those numbers are consistent with what is seen in the literature. We asked some of the first questions, and I think this is on the 9-month survey for sure. Did you ever have wheezing or whistling in the chest at any time in the past? Ever diagnosed with bronchiolitis? Ever diagnosed with an ear infection? So these are the kinds of fairly common infectious exposures that can be reasonably asked of parents, and it fits into some of the clinical data that was being asked about by Gilmore. Vaccination, of course, a tremendously interesting question for us. We began the vaccination questions a bit later. We have so far 169. They were added. Most mothers will do what is recommended, but some mothers at different times than recommended, and some restrict some vaccines. We had a hard stop at about 6% of mothers who said they would not vaccinate their kids. And this is actually reinforced by the actual data. Has your child at 9 months received any vaccines? 7 or 8% had not received vaccines at all. So you do have this about 1 in 12 mothers who are very, very resistant to getting vaccines. There's some hesitancy in about 10 or 15%, but there's a hard stop somewhere in a smaller fraction of the population. Our age 2 survey, I think what was most interesting to look at was the PROMIS survey of self-reported physical health, self-reported mental health. And I'm here highlighting women who reported fair or poor health. And you see, it's not a trivial number, nearly 1 in 5 or 1 in 6. And there are parallels, not surprisingly, between self-reported physical health and self-reported mental health. We don't have it here, but it's likely there's considerable overlap in who reports poor or fair in each of these categories. I didn't show you the other categories. Interestingly enough, in most surveys I've seen, the average person reports, more than half of people generally report excellent. In our survey, I would say good or very good were more common than excellent. It suggests that, again, as we know, mothers of 2-year-olds are living in a stressful environment and may not feel ideally mentally or physically healthy. And this is something we should, I think, pay attention to. I didn't have a breakdown, but I will tell you that the SRS-2, the Child Social Responsiveness Scale, which is an autism symptom identifier, we have available on some 270 March 2-year-olds and also on 125 Arch 4 to 6-year-olds. So this is giving you just a little flavor of the kinds of information we have at hand for you to look at. These slides we can share, we'll put on our CHARM website. They're anonymous, you can look at them. And all sorts of hypotheses. I'll just throw out some very simple ones just from the variables we have here, not even taking into account other variables such as the birth certificate, the longer term child follow-up, the more variables that we have in the database and the birth certificate. So does poor self-reported health at 2 years map on low income, or does it map on poor sleep, or does it map on aerobic exercise, either in one direction or another? Do attitudes towards vaccination change if babies have been hospitalized or have had experienced illnesses? Does wheezing occur more often in the non-breastfed, the breastfed? How about poor sleep in infancy? Does it predict autism symptoms at 2 years? So that's just a few ideas for you to play with. By no means a comprehensive picture, but merely, really frankly, to kind of tease you a little bit, to maybe stimulate some thoughts. As a great scientist once said, I think it was Claude Bernard, if you walk into the laboratory, you put on your coat, you become very precise, exact, you follow rules. But when you leave the laboratory, you take off your coat, you go home, you allow your mind to wander, to think openly, to think widely, and that's how science works.
So this is really just to remind you guys, a lot of you have already used this method for requesting data or biospecimens. So if you are interested in accessing our data or our biospecimens or both, we have a process for doing that. To let you know, we try to keep the process as simple and straightforward and not being time consuming as we can. But at the same time, it's trying to make it so that there is a fair way to request access to information and to data. So if you're writing a grant and you want to include our data to be analyzed in that grant, or you're going to want to do some analysis, this would be how you would go about it. So you would go to our website, which is, you can go to charmstudy.org, and that takes you directly to us, but we're under the Epi department at MSU, but that's where it lives. But charmstudy.org will take you here. So under for researchers, and is my, yes, I think it was my internet that was messing up, Nigel, and I thought it was yours. So I apologize for interrupting you, but maybe that's why mine. So anyway, so if you go to for researchers, you can come to this page where you can see we have 3 different links. So collaborations, we have funding opportunities, and just for fun, I'm going to show you this scientific groups and meetings. So in about a week, you'll be able to come here and you'll see the newest CHARM All Investigator meeting. So a recording of this meeting and the slides will be posted here. And it'll take us about a little less than a week to get the recording fixed up and posted, but the slides and agenda will be here. And just so you know, there are also we've done seminar series. So some of the people who have given talks are here as well, just so you know that exists. Okay, back to collaboration. So if you click on collaboration, it'll take you to, my slow computer will take you to this page. And this is really just an outline of our process for collaborations or for our investigators to request data. So first you would need to request approval. So this is more a step to make sure that what you're asking for isn't already being done by somebody else, that it fits into the priorities or fits into the ability of us to give you that information. So at that point, if you are approved, you'll either be approved within 1 to 2 weeks. It's normally less than a week. But if it comes at a bad time or timing's off, sometimes it might take 2. If you're approved, you'll receive an email with an approval number. And then if you're not approved, you would get feedback and you may be able to reapply. You could, at step 2 is when you would request that data. So maybe you are writing a grant and you would like to say to us, I'd like to use some of your biological specimens and some of your data. So you write it into the grant. And of course, it takes time for you to receive that grant. But once you get the grant, you can come back to us at that point and say, okay, now I'm ready to receive that data. So this step is more to give us a chance to learn as much as possible exactly what you want so that we can give you exactly what you want. So it's a short survey. You can use, we have code books and data dictionaries online. We don't have all of them yet online, although the study office and the data managers are working really hard on creating new code books and data dictionaries. Here's an example of kind of what we're looking for. Very simple, the variable name, why you need it, and if you had any comments. And then you can send us that. We do mention that as an investigator, you're responsible for IRB and material transfer agreements, although we do help facilitate that. Me and myself, as well as Alexa sometimes does that as well. And then for step 3, when you're ready to publish or talk or give a talk about those results, we ask that you complete a 3rd form, which just kind of informs us, lets us know that you're going to present this information. If it's a manuscript, we ask for a little time to review the manuscript. But again, we try to make it very timely, understanding that abstracts usually need to be approved very quickly. And manuscripts, we again try to do it fairly quickly. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about this, but this is where, if you're interested in collaborating with us and using some of the data collected here or the biospecimens, that's our process for getting access to those. Do you want to add anything to that, Nigel or Jean? Okay.
You've covered it very well, Tracy. I think but it'd be interesting to see if any of the potential users of these services have questions for us.